I thought I'd do my introduction, my own introduction tonight, in an historical fashion. Who am I? Where am I from? Why is there an interest in hairdressing? Let me go back 160 years when my great-grandfather came to Gawler. He was a stonemason, a master stonemason. He was only 34 at the time. And he began, who knows where he built in Gawler. I do know some of the constructions that are still standing, but he would have had a fair impact on the early days of Gawler back in 1856 when he arrived. He was 32, his wife was 8 years younger, and they had 13 children. So I'm happy to say that he left a footprint on the history of Gawler. In fact, probably 26 footprints if you really try to count them out. The 13th of those children was my grandfather, Frederick West, who was born in 1873. His early claim to fame was as a footballer for Gawler South, or South Gawler as it was probably called back then. He was captain in the 1890s and captained 2 premiership teams, but his real life's work was as a moulder. He learnt his trade at James Martin's, and soon after that went across to James Robinson's on Barnet Road, back in the very early days. And he must have been a very good moulder, or a bit temperamental, I'm not sure, because he did spend his life between the Britannia foundry and the Eagle foundry up in King Street, and I think he was probably highly sought after, and that's where he gained a lot of. I guess he was quite well known and quite good with his trade. He in fact moved across to Railway Terrace, lived right alongside of James Robinson, right at the back of the foundry. And I remember as a very young child walking down the well-worn path to the back, opening the gate and just seeing the big foundry there in front of me. And that was one of my vivid memories of the Britannia foundry. He worked until he's into his 70s. And about the last 15 of those, he rode his bike from Railway Terrace up to the Eagle foundry. So he just loved his work, and he was dedicated, and some of his work would still be seen around the town. We don't know exactly where, but in all of that time he was well sought afterwards, and I'm sure that you can see his work. And I'm proud to say that he left a footprint on the history of Gawler. My father, Murray West, born in 1910, he was the 4th child of Fred, and he was quite a good scholar at school, but with the looming depression there was no money to send him on to any tertiary education, and so he eventually finished up at the age of about 23 in the Britannia foundry, working with his father. The next year, the foundry was sold to E. Anders and Sons of Freeling, and Dad continued to work there for another 42 years. And the last half of that as the manager, and in fact he oversaw the closure of the plant when that happened, just on his retirement. So he too has work around the moulding work around the town and around the area that sits there quite silently, quite privately, I guess. No one knows who did it or when it was done or how it was done, but it's there. So he was also very active in the community. He was a town councillor, and he was on the swimming pool committee when that was built. He was chairman of the high school council when the high school moved from up in Gawler East over to the Barnet Road. He was decades in St John's Ambulance and Rotary. He was in football administration. So he was very, very highly active in the community. He was actually pre-selected to the local seat of Parliament and withdrew at the last moment, and the successor got in and spent 17 years there. So right or wrong move, I'm not sure, but I think I was on the way at the time, so that's perhaps a right move. And I'm very proud to think that Dad also had a footprint in the history of Gawler. As for me, I don't think I've got a footprint on the history of Gawler, but this is a very humble project that I've just started to do, a humble effort that I can contribute in my own way. And when I was 13, I landed the plum job, working in Harold Moran's hairdressing shop, behind the counter, selling cigarettes, taking the money. I was earning the big bucks, 10 shillings a week, and all my mates at school were on 2 shillings a week, and they had to do a lot of jobs around home for that, but I was earning the big bucks. For 2 years I did that, and I made sure that I kept the job, and because 10 shillings bought a lot of things back in those days for a 13 or 14-year-old. When I was 15, Harold asked me if I'd like to become an apprentice hairdresser, and so I gave it a couple of days notice, a couple of days thinking about, and I said I'll let you know on Friday or whatever it was. And I really didn't have any burning ambition for a career. Perhaps if I kept at school I might have become a teacher, gone to teachers college, but no, hey, why not? I'll become a hairdresser. I knew the shop, I knew Harold, and so that's what happened. That was the age of 15 back in 1968. In fact, it was 47 years ago yesterday that I signed my indenture papers. I just had to do some research on that one, so that's a fair while ago. When I was 18, Harold had his first heart attack, so I was 3 years into my apprenticeship, and he had a very bad heart attack, and he was in hospital for quite some time, and the family asked me if I would take over running the business, opening the doors and so forth. It was just me. So I did that, and took the best part of 12 months or so to get rightly back on his feet. And no sooner did that than the second heart attack. So again, I kept on doing this. And I managed the place right throughout, because I didn't want him to think that he had to come to work if he wasn't feeling very well, so I took that burden away. And I just finished my indentures at the age of 21, and Harold had his third attack, which was fatal, and then the family asked me if I'd like to take over the business. So with that I did, and I spent another 5 years there. So it's a total of about 12 or 13 years in the business of ruling and freak in the main street of Gawler. Many of you might recognise the shop when we see the slide afterwards. So that's how I got into hairdressing. After 5 years, I just moved over the hill to the Barossa, and you can take the boy out of Gawler, but you can't take Gawler out of the boy. And I kept up with a few things, but particularly hairdressing kind of escaped me from those years onwards. In 2007, Ron Mosley passed away. I noticed that, and he was, I thought, he was in hairdressing for about 50 years. And I thought to myself, well, there's a long chain between, I guess it's me, and the first hairdressers of Gawler, and there's a link that's gone. And if there's not a story written, if the history isn't recorded by me, it's not going to get done, because I'm the only one with a link to all of those hairdressing, all of the stories, I guess, of which I've got a few. So I did that, started to mentally note a few things, and I started to write them down, and with the result of that is the paper that I've done. The paper is my experiences in the shop, some of the stories that I heard, the folklore that you hear in a hairdressing shop. Trove probably 95%, because no one's got a record. There was no record of hairdressing anywhere other than in Trove, going right back to the early days, and what a wonderful resource. And I spent many, many hours and hours and hours and weeks and months poring over the bunyip through the Trove to get it. Since I left, Dave Oliver, who was Dave the Barber in the main street, was able to fill in from 83 up till the present. He got quite a few. And the fifth source is going to be you, the public. We need you to add your stories, add your little anecdotes, correct me, because I may not be right. There might be some things missing, or things could be upside down. And so there's going to be an opportunity for everybody to have an input to that. Let's keep the thing going. Hopefully it's not even nowhere near done. And so I call on all of that. And this will be, the actual paper itself will be on the Gawler website. It can be emailed to anybody, and I'd also like to leave some copies of it in a folder in the hairdressing salons around the place, so that people can actually read it and put their little story to it as well, because I'm sure everybody's got a story to tell about an experience in their hairdressing shop. So that's where it all began. Okay. Yes, please. This is talking about the many characters that have gone before us in hairdressing, and I'm about to uncover some of them. Not too many hairdressers. I don't know how many builders there would have been, or plumbers, or whatever during that time, but there really wasn't a lot of hairdressers in the history of Gawler. at any, like over the period of time. I've uncovered a few, but you know, I would have thought there certainly isn't hundreds of them. There is only virtually dozens of them because of the longevity of where they were. Yes, please. A number of names have brought that longevity to fruition. Rawling and Freak, the business that closed in 1978 after 93 continuous years as a hairdressing salon. Now, you won't see that again. There was only four owners, and I'll cover those in a moment. Other families included the Cooch family, the Gwynn family, and the Martin family. And they saw more than one generation in the trade. So I know Ron Wasley had probably 50 years, but he worked alone for all of that time. So there's four families, or three families and another business, which were very, very long-lived in the process. This is the shop. Can you remember that? Yeah. Familiar with that one? Yeah.
Next to the bunyip. Next to the bunyip office.
Yes, yeah, just down from the bunyip. Rawling and Freak remained on there from probably 1906 onwards. I don't know why it never changed. I could have changed it, just wasn't a thing to do back in those days. And in fact, I left Harold Moran's name up there as well. Although he'd been gone for 5 years, I still left his name. Perhaps I was too tired to paint it, I don't know why, but it was a nostalgic thing, and that was it. Okay. The first mentioned hairdresser that I found in the bunyip was W. Wakefield in 1869. I suppose he'd been going a little while beforehand, but he wasn't necessarily advertising. He described himself as hair-cutting, dressing and shaving establishment, and he claimed years of experience in London and the colonies. And ladies and gentlemen could be waited on at their own residence. The Gawlers never had barbers, probably until today. All of the people that came out from England were London trained, and they were hairdressers. And so this has gone on and on and on. The only mention in the bunyip over that time of barbers was from a couple of stories that came back from America, where in fact it was Max Hill. Some of you may know Max Hill. He was over there sending reports back, and he was talking about going to the barber shop. But in Gawler it was always hairdressers and tobacconists. The word barber was never used, and I guess that just flowed on from person to person up until today. Yeah, okay, thank you. People like J.W. Stone and Joseph Hocking continued to advertise early in the piece. And Mr. Wakefield added a ladies' hairdressing room where ladies may enjoy privacy and attention. These stories I've got from either adverts or little personal notes in the bunyip. And I've tried to, some of them were quite boring, but I've made little stories out of it. So they all add to the texture of the story. In 1878, there were 4 hairdressers operating, and Mr. J. Rawling opened his shop in Murray Street opposite Jacob Street in 1886. So that'd be about where, is it the Feast restaurant is? Somewhere in that area, might be, yeah, somewhere in that area there, right opposite Jacob Street. In 1884, Mr. Radford. Oh, this is in 1896, Arthur Window came to town. I haven't been able to find anything about Anguston, but he came to town, and he was obviously quite progressive in having his razors engraved with his name on it. I know there's one of these razors are over here tonight, but there's also one down in Dave the Barber's shop in the main street of Gawler, and he had his name engraved on it. And the book, what's in the book? Is it a diary or a?
No, it's a little complimentary thing. The writing slate, which I think was used by a grocer in Anguston, because he's got an Anguston name and he's got customers' orders for meat and fruit and veg and things like that.
Yeah, okay. So it's a slate.
Yes.
Wow. He obviously went to a lot of effort to get that type of thing produced, and compliments giving it away. So he was doing things in a big way. Okay, next one is in 1884, Mr. Radford advertised for an apprentice. It was the first such mention in the paper. And in December '86, he sold out to Charles Cope, who offered first-class plunge baths for 4p. So that was a new trend on there. And then P. Anderson was operating a ladies' and gentlemen's hairdresser in June '86. Not so much mention of ladies' hairdressers back in those days. I guess they wore their hair tied back or under a shawl, and certainly under a hat. Ladies did get some mention, but not as much as what you might have expected, or perhaps they just didn't advertise. But it was certainly a lack of ladies mentioned there. And A.D. Mackenzie opened up a tobacconist hairdresser near the old spot in 1890, but the very next month he died, and a sell-off of all of his equipment and goods took place. So he was one of the short-lived hairdressers of the town, living just 1 month before he carked it. In the 1900s, okay, on the 8th of February 1900, the following notice appeared in the Bunyip. The undersigned hairdressers and tobacconists beg to notify the public that their respective establishments will, after March the 5th, close at 8 o'clock each evening, except on Wednesday the 22nd, when they will be closed at 1 p.m. and not reopen until the following day. On Saturdays they will remain open until 10:30 p.m. So they did some long hours. Now that's in 1900. They have any power back in 1900? No. Mr. Wakefield, the first hairdresser, said he'll cut hair until it's dark. That was one of his mottos. He obviously had the Tilly lantern or something there, but so he would cut hair until dark, whatever that meant back in the day. So there's Arthur Window, R.J. Hill and J. Rawling, who were those hairdressers back in 1900. The next one is Will A. Cooch. That's Bert's father. He opened next to the Old Spot Hotel in 1900, and John Rawling and Arthur Window were frequently offering their services and fancy goods in weekly adverts in the Bunyip. They were pushing their adverts pretty well to buy these types of things. And the next one is 1904. Mr. Johnny Rawling, announced that he'd taken into partnership Mr. Fred Freak, who had considerable experience in wig making and ladies' hairdressing, and he'd also been working there for 8 years already. So that was the first mention of Fred Freak, but he was now in the partnership, and that name, as I said before, remained on the door until 1978, even though Fred died earlier. And the next one is in April 1911. Oh, hang on. 1906, Arthur Window sold his business to Herb Gwynn, and Mr. Window operated the saloon for 14 years. So that slate and the razors we just saw, he was only operating here 14 years, sold the business to Herb Gwynn, and so another dynasty started back there in 1906. In 1911, hairdressers raised their prices as follows: shaves 4p and haircuts 9p, and on Saturdays up to $1. That was quite a rise, I guess, back in those days, a fair percentage. And the next one is February 12. J. Scurry opened a saloon and tobacconist on Block Road, Gawler South, next to the news agency. We were just talking about that a moment ago. I'm trying to pick out the bits, and I don't want to deprive you of reading the whole story. The next one should be here. Oh, that's right. Yes, Mr. Cooch claimed to have the finest hairdressing outside of Adelaide. Hard to imagine what it might have looked like back in those days, or what it had to be. And the next one, hairdressers up to this is interesting. Hairdressers up until 1921 seemed to have a monopoly on the sales of tobacco and smoking requisites, which they guarded vigorously. Even the law was on their side. The Act actually said that hairdressers and tobacconists would sell their cigarettes and tobacco, and other people could do as well, as long as the hairdressers were open. Now, once the hairdresser closed, no one could sell any. So it was a closed shop in the times, I guess, after hours or on Sundays or Saturday afternoons and that type of thing. So that was quite a fascinating little find. But there was pressure to bear from people, I guess, and from the government to change that around. A guy called Rolly Riggs opened up a hairdresser and tobacconist shop at Gawler South, next to Scurry's, in that shopping centre opposite McDonald's. Did anyone remember Rolly Riggs? I can remember him from the 60s. Yeah, no. He was a little guy. He's Murray Martin, the late Murray Martin's wife, was his daughter.
Murray Martin's wife's father.
Yes.
Rolling,
yes, yep, that's right. So he's been going quite some time. There was a story, I wasn't going to relate this, but I'll do it very quickly. There was news around that he'd won a fortune in a Calcutta sweep from India. He'd paid about 15 rupees, and they were thinking it might be worth 25 to 30,000 pounds, and he was just about to start celebrating, but in fact it wasn't quite that much. It was only about 400 pounds, less state taxes, but still, that was enough to be recorded in the paper of the day. Keith Martin was a hairdresser in 1925. That was recorded there. The first mention of Keith, that was the time that his mother was killed in a murder-suicide up at his place. Some of you may know that one. In December 1925, the Australian President of the Hairdressers Employers Union was called to a meeting in Gawler to discuss the conditions that local hairdressers were required to work under. The locals were seeking to be able to work under the same conditions as their Adelaide counterparts. Again, the law was had been set for those people working here in Gawler. The new Act came into effect at the time, which disallowed hairdressers from opening on the mornings of public holidays. Previously they were exempt, but this was now changed and enforced, much to the chagrin of the hairdressers, as it challenged their dominance in the market. They were able to open whenever they wanted, and that was it. And the next one is, there's a couple of these in the paper. The hairdressers played the combined banks in a cricket game. This gave us a bit of an insight into perhaps who some of the hairdressers were at the time, because whilst the owners of the salons or saloons were mentioned, a lot of times their employees weren't. So we can assume, maybe, or rightly or wrongly, that these people here, DeFicio, Moran, Gwynn, Bednall, Kevin Moran, C. Freeman, F. Grau, W. Richards, P. Gwynn, S. Rowell and M. Martin were playing for the hairdressers team. This was the first mention of Harold and of Kevin. Anyone remember Kevin Moran? Harold's brother. He was a hairdresser at Tanunda when I met him in the late 60s, probably late 60s. Yeah. He must have worked here at the time. So that's those people there. As I said, we may or may not assume they were hairdressers. Some of them were salon owners, but not necessarily. And in 1929, after 23 years in business, Mr. H.J. Gwynn updated his saloon, and this was enough to draw the attention of the Bunyip Reporter. Some of you may have seen this shop. Familiar to anybody? That's Joe Jacob being served, and I think that's Herb Gwynn. It's in Gwynn's shop, and I think it's Herb because I was talking to Joe's son yesterday. He was born in Joe was born in just before the turn of the century. So if he's 30, 35 there, would he be 35, 40? It's got to be in about 1940, which would have put it back in Herb's day. Yeah. So.
Is that Bruce Gwynn on the left?
Sorry?
Because he used to live in Williston near us. Percy Gwynn.
Don't know who that is.
Looks like Percy.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. This was owned by Keith Jacob, and he'd given it to Dave the barber, and I just went in there and got him to take it down and took a photograph of it so that we could have it. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Certainly a Gwyn behind the counter. You can see the jaw there, but I'll stand corrected if it's not Herb. But yeah, the next one. It's a leading saloon. It is always gratifying to report Gawler business houses keeping up with the times, and Mr H.J. Gwyn's Hairdressing and Tobacconist's Wares opposite the Town Hall is as replete and up-to-date as any metropolitan tonsorial establishment. Mr Gwyn has installed electricity to his aid, and electric hair clippers are available on all 3 chairs, the apparatus being handily available on elevated pulleys. An instantaneous electric heater gives the hot water immediately, and his clients have the advantage that all instruments are sterilised beneath the cleansing heat before being used on the person. The saloon has been freshly decorated, finished in light airy colours, and the woodwork shows fine examples of Grainer's art. The shop generally has an inviting appearance, enhanced by the knowledge that all requirements in the weed may be obtained, as well as toilet and sporting requisites. So that was... I don't know, it sounds like it might have been Ken Barnett as a trainee reporter, perhaps, back in the early days. Very well written, and yeah, so it must have been pretty good. Again, electricity. Electricity has been installed. This was in 1929. Yeah, so I don't know what they had for power back then. Can't answer that. I need someone who's old, Max.
Max?
Power station used to be down near the Ford, going over to Gawler West. Follow the river around from the Oval.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the original power station was, I reckon.
Yeah. But that bit about power, I don't know whether there was power in 1929 or what.
No, I was only 1 year old at that day.
And the next one. Yeah, in January, this is another game of tennis between the banks and the hairdressers. P. Gwyn, that'll be Perth, I guess. Deficio, F. Gwyn, and A. Rao, K. Martin, and H. Gwyn, and the bankers won. And the next month they played Lewiston. H. Moran and K. Tiver joined the hairdressers team. So again, there's a few names which somebody might have some knowledge of, or be able to investigate those names and find out that perhaps they were in the game back at that time. Fred Freak died in 1930 at the age of 46, and that left Mr. Rawling and whoever still running the shop, but the name still remained on the front. And the next one, October, that's it. The bill changing the weekly Wednesday half-holiday for hairdressers and assistants in Gawler was introduced, and it seemed inevitable that the unique opening hours situation that existed in town would soon end. The next month the Act passed, and this meant hairdressers could trade on Wednesdays but had to close on Saturday afternoons. And in May 32, the opening hours of hairdressing saloons was finally agreed upon by the minister and shopkeepers. Monday to Thursday closing time would be 8 o'clock, Friday 9 and Saturdays at 1. The next one is in 1935, another hairdresser came on the scene. J. Mortimer opened absolutely the most modern and up-to-date hairdressing saloon in Gawler. Mr. Mortimer offered electric clippers, electric hot water, face massaging and shampooing, and they were also the local agents for healing golden-voiced radio, no doubt the latest invention for locals to inspect. The shop was located in the Regal Buildings in Murray Street. Where's Regal Buildings? Cinema? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the old cinema. Okay. Keith Martin was advertising permanent waving, full head of a 10 and sixpence and a half head of 6 and sixpence. So I'm not sure how you perm a half head. I guess that might be the top or something. I don't know. But it was 6 and 6 anyway if you only wanted a half a head. And the price of haircuts began to rise again after the Depression, where the prices fell by 33 1/3%. 1 and 6 down to 1 shilling. They are now being raised by 1 and threepence. And it seems that hairdressers worked harder and longer than most other trades, being available to the public for 65 hours a week in an age when the normal hours was 44 hours, and employees demanding that they be reduced to 40 or 36 hours. So there was an awful lot of hours spent by those hairdressers. It seemed to be the pattern all along. I couldn't quite find out when they opened, but I found out what the closing hours were, and assuming they were open at a reasonable time in the morning, they did a lot of hours in a week. And the secretary of the Master Hairdressing Association placed a notice in the Bunyip that all hairdressers will charge 1 3 for haircuts as of Monday the 11th of May. So I just said the ACCC would have amused at that today. And I can remember back in my time when there was a little slip in the advertiser that haircuts will be going up as of next Monday. So that's back in the late 60s and probably early 70s. The haircuts were one price right throughout the state back in those days. It was only a small...
I paid sixpence per haircut.
Sixpence?
You used to put a little box on the seat there.
Yeah.
To wind there, you had to pay 1 pence.
Oh!
Yeah.
Sixpence. That's it. Johnny Rawling, yes. John Rawling died in March 1945. He was born in York, England in 1860 and commenced hairdresser in the Bacchus in Gawler here in 1884. He'd been going for 60 years as a hairdresser in town. And he passed away at his home in Todd Street after a short illness. He arrived here in 1884 accompanied by his brother-in-law James Ashton. Does that ring any bells with anybody? James Ashton? Very famous artist. Yep. And a teacher of art as well. In our shop there was a huge painting which was quite beautiful, huge thing. And it was a James Ashton, but I didn't know much about it when I was there. And when the family sold me the business, the painting was the first thing that went out. Yeah, James Ashton was a very famous artist.
Went out to where?
To the family.
Oh.
Across the road here somewhere, yeah. And so that just goes on to talk about some of the things that in the obituary that Johnny Rawling had done. And he left a widow, Frances Rawling, and she continued to run the business for a little while. Next one. Yeah, this is interesting. In 1946, Harold Weaver advised that he had reopened his service station and hairdressing saloon in Williston. The public could buy car tyres, cycle tyres, batteries, retreads and get a haircut at the same time. And he had a large range of fancy goods, oils and razor blades. So I assume that's Bricky Weaver in that time.
My dad.
Your dad, yeah. Yep. Where was the shop in Williston?
Where the BP separate survey is.
On the left, okay. Yeah.
Petrol station.
Yeah.
Photographs showing advertising hairdressing alongside the gallery.
Yeah. Well, that's a shop the picture we need to get in the actual, yeah. Keith Martin's daughter, the next one please, yeah. Keith Martin, if you got any more stories of that's the perfect place to be able to put onto to an addendum there, yeah, absolutely. Keith Martin's daughter Pauline was following her father's footsteps into the trade and seeking models for all classes of ladies' hairdressing in June 1946. At the same time, Keith Martin was advertising cold permanent waving and promoted his phone number as 187. When I said before that I was the last man standing, that's not quite true because Pauline Martin, or Pauline Norton as she is still living at Victor Harbour. I've been trying to contact her by phone for the last few weeks and no one's answering there, so I'm not quite sure what the problem is, but I did call in there about a year or so ago to see if I could get some more information. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to contact her this time, but I'll keep trying. Yeah, so she didn't work there for a long time, I don't think, because she got married and moved out to Roseworthy College. Ray Norton, yeah. No, I caught up with both of them about a year ago, and yeah, that's fantastic. And the next one is
Where was Keith Martin's shop?
opposite where the car park is now. Is it Victory Square? Is it the car park in the middle of the main street?
We bought his shop.
Yeah, alongside of Growers.
We bought Martin's shop.
Yep.
1963 or 4.
Yeah.
Made the Epico Cafe.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. One before that, you've got Francis Rawling. Go back. Mrs. Francis Rawling passed away in November 47, and Harold Moran took over the business of Rawling and Freak, which he ran until his death in 1973. So he was there for over 40 years. And yeah. Herb Gwynn passed away in August of 1953, and this story appeared in the front page of the Bunyip, emphasising the esteem that he was held. It talked about his death occurring on the Sunday. He was well known and respected. He died aged 67, but he had been a very, very keen sports person, Herb Gwynn, and a very great contributor to the community through sport and through flowers and through a whole lot of other things. So he was not only a long time in hairdressing, but he was also 47 years in hairdressing, but he also contributed to the community quite a bit as well through other things. And Fred, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, Fred Gwynn took over. Go back one. Fred Gwynn took over his father's business following his death and was renowned for sales of sporting goods, art and craft material and tobacco goods, along with a long-standing hairdressing business. The name of H.J. Gwynn Hairdresser remained on the door long after his death. Such was the institution established by Bert Gwynn. I can remember going to Fred Gwynn's shop. They're talking about the art and craft. I bought my first cigarettes there. That was cane that you could buy and cut them off. It was quite economical. I used to smoke this cane, but it was quite warm after a while. Yeah, Hicksy was there. He was around the corner. This is the next one. Yeah, Cooch on the 14th of December 1954. William Arthur Cooch passed away, and he was 73. So he had been. That was in 73. He spent a lot of his time in Gawler hairdressing. In 1949, Bert had sold up in Alice Springs, ready for a move to Gawler, after operating a hairdressing saloon up in Alice for 12 years. Yeah, next one. Yeah. And again. So in the early 1960s, Gawler had several long-term hairdressing businesses. Bert Cooch operated next to the Picture Theatre on Carlton Road. Ron Wasley completed his apprenticeship with Harold Moran. There's Ron. Keep going, yep. With Harold Moran in the early 1950s, and following a riff with Harold. I never found out what that was about, but it must have been a good one. He left to open his own business on the southern side of the South End Hotel. And Fred Gwynn was opposite the Town Hall, and Keith Martin was in the twilight of his career opposite the G.J. Cole store, which is now that car park. Yeah. Yeah. Harold Moran was the proprietor of Rawling and Freak, and he took on Neil Rowell as an apprentice. Neil followed straight on from Ron Wasley. Neil was heir apparent to the business, but his life was cut short by cancer, and he died in April 1968, aged just 23. And I commenced my apprenticeship in May of 68, a month after Neil's passing, and completed it in 73. Harold Moran died in October that year, and I took over the business for a further 5 years. And I was only the fourth owner of the business in 93 years. Quite incredible when I think back on it. I didn't know at the time until I'd actually done some research. And this era also saw the retirement of Keith Martin, Bert Cooch, Fred Gwynn, and the emergence of Nick Sir Costa. That's Nick's shop there up the top, who opened on the corner of Finner Street and Murray Street. He engaged one apprentice, Tony Bombaderi, who eventually took over the business. So that is, that was Nick's shop. Ladies' hairdressers opening up included Shergis and Schwertz and Diane Salon. Ron Wasley moved up to Bert Cooch's side upon Bert's retirement and the redevelopment of the Picture Theatre, and he always worked on his own. He passed away in 2007, aged 75. Keith Martin worked part-time for Harold up until 1973, which is a period spanning 50 years, and maintained good health and a keen interest in community activities. He passed away in 1974, aged 72. So I worked with Keith in 73, so that was just about 50 years after he began. It was just incredible. Now I look back, then I didn't, he was an old man, but now I look back and I really do appreciate the longevity and the time that some of these people had put in. They were quite incredible. There's a page here which I haven't covered from Dave the Barber, covering from 1983 up to the present, which is fantastic. We're going to trends, the modern era. Go on. Trends over 175 years. Styles have changed, but a couple of world events. And I've kind of made this up from experience. Someone might help me down. Go next one. The two world events changed the way, in particular, that men wore their hair. Back in the early days of Gawler, hair was generally longer, they had beards, so it was more of a trim. And then come the First World War, when hair had to be kept shorter, and the styling went right out. It was more convenience, something that they could wash and not have to worry about, particularly when the soldiers were overseas. No time for grooming. So short back and size was a preferred style, and shaving every few days at the hairdresser was almost the norm. Hairdressers used to do a lot of shavings back in those days, and all the customers had their own cutthroat razors and their own brush and mug. And certainly on a Saturday night before they went out to the shindigs, they'd be in there for their haircut and shave. So that was the tradition up until the 1960s, so for quite many decades, when the music group called the Beatles set a new trend, and the one that lasted 50 years. The mop tops, they were called. They had a new style, as everyone here is aware, and that really did change the way we look today. In my time as a hairdresser, lots of rows. Lots of rows where the children wanted to have their hair longer. The father, after 4 or 5 decades of short hair, and his father before him, no, it wasn't going to be. So I had row after row after row. I had to please the father because he was paying, but I knew the lad was going to go to school next day and get castigated by the people. So I actually saw families breaking up over this. It was really quite crude, really was. Interestingly enough, brother-sister relationships, quite often the girls would get around the father to allow the boys to have longer hair. So a lot of boys could thank their sisters for that, and it was quite fascinating to watch. Shaving died out in the late 50s and mid 60s. Because when razors became more available for people to use at home. I started in 68, and we were doing in the shop about 2 to 3 shaves a month, and I probably did about 6 or 8 or so during my career. Didn't like it at all; it was horrible. But that was the trade on that. Some people wanted it, so we used to do it. And I've still went through an old box that I took out of the shop when I left, and I've still got quite a few of the old cutthroats and strops and stones at home now, which is quite fascinating to relive after all of those years. And I can remember Harold telling me that he would quite often have to go up to the hutch and do the shaving up there, and sometimes before an operation, shave the old people or shave before the ops. And, that was back in the earlier, probably the 40s, yeah. So that was that. And the new wave, just to finish up, Gawler today has a new wave of hairdressers carrying out the duties of the tonsorial artist as required by their 21st century customers, but are blissfully unaware of the rich tapestry of history that's gone before them in the 19th and the 20th centuries. Will we ever see the longevity of Rawling and Freak, and Harold and myself, spanning 93 years? Or Will Cooch, who opened in 1900 and was succeeded by his son Bert into the 1960s, Herb and Fred Gwynn operated for more than 50, and Keith Martin and Pauline for more than 50. And how many backyarders were there in Gawler during this time? there are probably plenty of people who are willing to try their hand and earn a few bob. I'd like to know who they were. And finally, if you have a story or experience, as I've already mentioned, it'd be great to be able to do that. One thing I just thought of that it wasn't in here, but it was one of the weekly sales. It was Friday. People came down from all over the place, as far as Clare, Balaclava, even up deep from the Riverland. And it was the place to find out how many inches of rain someone had had, how many bags to the acre someone had had, how much the sheep were taking, and all of this sort of stuff. It was a real place for information sharing and gathering. And they used to come in and how many bags they're getting out at Freeling and how's this happening. And so it was really quite an interesting exercise to be the font of all knowledge of things happening in the agricultural world, and I guess in some other ways as well, because people used to confide in us we didn't really want to know it, but people confided with us anyway. And so that was that. There's a few stories that I haven't put in there that I probably won't, but there's there was in 1937.
This is being taped.
There was a guy came to Harold. His name was John Mudra, and he wanted his razor sharpened, so Harold sharpened it, and he came back and said, "Sure, it's sharp." "Yes, it's sharp." And so with that he took it and went down to Gawler Arms Hotel and knelt over the bath and cut his throat. And to this day, Harold told me that in the 60s. Didn't tell me who it was, but through Trove I was able to look it up. And for many years, I think the owners of the Gawler Arms always heard knocking and commotion in the middle of the night, and I was able to give them the answer to who it was. It was Johnny who did the job on himself back in 1937. So so it's just those little stories that come from years and years of being in the shop. And one morning, early one Saturday morning, I had two guys come to see me for a haircut, and they'd been on the terps all night. I guess they were about 20 or so. And they'd really had a good few drinks. And one of them became a father the night before, so they went out celebrating. Within 20 minutes they were both dead in a car accident. So that's a sort of really, really sad that those sort of things that in a hairdressing shop you get. And it was very uncanny how many times you'd cut someone's hair, elderly person, and the next week you're looking in the paper, they're gone. At least they went looking nice. But it was, I'm sure it's nothing to do with the haircut, but it was a sort of the things that you remember as many times that actually happened. So, yeah, I think that brings me to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'm sure there's questions and comments. And John Cliff, can I put your hand up here at one stage?
Those photos you're talking about of early weavers' garage and barber shop, we have got those, David.
Yep.
I think they're in the wiki, so
Well, they can be,
so we could furnish you with those.
I learned of a new hairdresser yesterday in Gawler. I didn't do the current one, but it was Gusto's up on Carlton Road. But there's a lot of these that do need to go in here as a record of today's. It's harder to put today's in than it is to put those in from decades and decades ago. But yeah, it's anyone who wants to. I guess we can set up a blog or an opportunity to be able to contribute towards it. Yeah, just on the end.
In Steinwatter's car yard, opposite the Baptist Church, Jean Winnet,
Yep.
There used to be a little alleyway alongside where what we call Piccolo's Blue House. There was an alleyway and there were little houses at the end, and she had my mum used to go there for hairdressing.
I actually went there several times, and so did you.
Yeah. Jean Winner gets a mention in the paper, but I'm assuming she was there, but I didn't know for sure. So there we are. We're going to gain information all the time.
Freely Cooch at Williston, that was Bird's wife.
Yes.
Yeah. She did it.
I knew Jean up in the 90s. She lived up in the Barossa, or she spent a lot of time in the Barossa, and she'd get her. No, she'd get her younger friends in their 80s and take them out for dinner. She was a live one.
Bruce.
In the 1940s, Herb and Fred Gwynn would go out to Roseworthy College in the evening and cut the hair of the students.
Okay, yep.
A service that was coming from Gawler,
Yep.
as was Dr. Coverton, for example, going out and looking after students out
Yep.
there.
That's a great couple of lines in the story. Yeah, absolutely.
You put the name Shergis up there, that name is still going.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, she's in her 90s, she gets her hair done at Shergis,
Yep.
and that's down
Yep.
at Croydon Park.
Yep. Yep.
She originally was in Arndale Shopping Centre, and now she's moved down there, and she's been doing it for many,
Yep.
many years.
Shergis was Shergis was alongside of us or down.
The second shop from Todd Street.
Yes.
Hamilton's, then Shergis.
Yes.
then
Yep.
Outgoing.
The bottom one. Next to us there was Schwertz. Yeah, Schwertz Hairdressers up the
And
top.
they're still going.
Yeah,
Mike Dennison.
Why are they called tonsorial
because they
Excuse my ignorance.
they speak. They're a lot of talking. It's just rabbiting on. Yeah, sometimes about nothing. Right.
Tony. Tony.
You said something about Martin's murder or father or suicide. What was that?
There was a young lad from Tanunda, whose father was the principal up there at the school, came down to Gawler here to go to school and boarded at Martin's, which is in Short Street, just behind the Gawler East, or the Gawler East Primary as it used to be. For whatever reason, he snapped and got a gun and shot Keith's mother and then shot himself.
Where?
In Short Street, yeah. There was a full page story in the Bunyip on that one, and he was buried in Adelaide at the same time as she was buried here. But his grave at Nailsworth has just got Jimmy on it. That's all. His father came down. Keats was the name. He came down to be a principal, I think, at Gawler Primary School, and a very active participant in the community. I just looked at his name and he was in everything down here, so I guess the town didn't hold any grudges on his parents, but young Jimmy was the one.
Right.
Yeah, just quickly saying about barbers knowing, talking to the customers and that, it was always noted back in my days when I was doing the post office that if the police wanted to know what was going on around town, they always saw the barber first.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
whether they pass information on or not.
Yep.
Yeah, Meg.
Just on the subject of Saturday morning trading, when it came in, what did they do for weddings? Nothing.
No, not really. Oh, that come in a day or two before. But,
Yeah, about men's hairdressing or women's
No,
hairdressing?
ladies.
oh, ladies. Oh,
Yeah, the ladies.
no mention.
I mean,
No.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm thinking get the mobile.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You know,
Stan.
Joe Brandon from the corner of Dundalk Road, the chap who opened that one up, I discovered he came from the next village in Ireland the town that I came from.
He's in Kapunda at the moment.
Yeah.
I asked him to contribute if he had something, but he chose not to, or didn't want to, or couldn't, or whatever. So, one more.
Ian.
Serious question.
Serious question from Ian.
When you say you learn how to become a barber, what sort of things do you need to learn to cut someone's hair? I mean, obviously you've got to learn.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone that can just do it in the backyard.
I went to trade school in Adelaide. Being country, I went to the old TAFE in Finner Street for a Tuesday morning, I think it was, to do theory, and then 2 or 3 blocks a year down in Adelaide for a fortnight, which we did practice. And otherwise, it's just pot luck. If you were in the shop at the wrong time, you got me. Oh yeah. But it's pretty comprehensive actually. They cover a whole lot of things in the hairdressing course. Yeah.
What about looking at diseases of the scalp?
Yep.
Is that how important was that?
Very much so. Yeah, skin and diseases. even down to electrical, because we're actually dealing with electrical clippers and that sort of thing. And so that even like taking care of power and diseases nothing about character, but it was all to do with the practical side of cutting hair.
I can remember the barbers that I went to, before they had all this trade school, the apprentices were allowed to start, and then the experienced chap took over.
That's what I did.
The apprentice was told to go
Yep.
ridiculous.
Yep. That's what I did for quite a while.
How
So,
far were you allowed to go?
depending how much Harold was talking to someone else. If he got carried away, I went all the way through, perhaps. But yeah, and some people are good teachers, and others aren't. And I'd say honestly that Harold wasn't a good teacher. He wasn't a nice enough bloke, but he wasn't an instructor, if you like. So I had to do a lot of it on my own. But I got by. After 3 years, I was able to run the shop. That's called the School of Hard Knocks.
Last question? Yes.
Harold Moran got my dad started.
Yep.
Not as an apprentice.
Mm.
You just showed him what.
Showed him, yep.
And their dad practiced on the footballers.
One of the questions I was going to ask Pauline Norton when I do get her is where did Keith start operating from? I knew that in 25 he was a hairdresser, in 28 he was on his own, but I'm not sure who he did his trade with or how he actually learned. So that's one of the things that still needs to go in there. But yeah, I'll just keep putting the contribution in. And
there's a woman called Judy Gibbons, and she used to work for Shogas. You might want to come onto her. I can give you her name. Judy Gibbons. She used to work for Shogas.
okay, Sugar's.
In
You
the
know,
70s.
12 months ago I had an inkling that the history of hairdressing in Gawler would be interesting, and it sure was.
Yeah.
Well
There's a
done,
lot of-
and I'd now like to ask Pat to present a vote of thanks on behalf of us all.